All right, so let's just get into it. Um, Obviously, we're talking about the aftermath. And then if you weren't with us last week, let me do a quick recap. We spoke about the aftermath, and the question that we asked was, how do we live in the aftermath of great and difficult change? That was the question we explored last week. How do we live through things like the loss of a loved one? How do we live through the loss of a job or some great change that has come and forced itself on you? How do we live beyond that? And then we discovered that what we should do to live and survive and thrive in the aftermath is by firstly having a clear and compelling vision for your future. That's what we spoke about. Mel referred to it during the worship session. If you did miss that message, it's available on our page here. You can go check it out just to catch up. Today, I want to build on that. Okay, so last week we said we need a vision beyond the now that sees beyond the current struggle to a brighter, better future. That's the point. What this does is it empowers us to endure even the toughest times because we know that where we are now, what we're going through now is temporary. It will pass. And so what we do is we put all of our focus and our energy into what is to come instead. It's like living in a state of hope and faith. That's the point of why we need to live with vision. I gave an example about the oncologist who said that most of the patients that have a clear and compelling vision for their future do better in treatment of terminal cancers. So it just shows you the power of vision and hope and faith for the future brings to us. So tonight, part 2 of the aftermath. Maybe there'll be a part 3. I don't know yet. We'll see how the week goes. But I want to build on what we spoke on last week, and I want to introduce a very simple, very practical concept that I learned in my life. I'll share with you tonight. Let me ask the question again before I tell you what we're talking about. And the question is, how do we live in the aftermath of great and difficult change? And so tonight, here is the principle for tonight. Last week was have a clear and compelling vision for your future. Tonight is this: change what you can or accept what you can't. Let me say that again. It's change what you can, but accept what you can't. So let me explain this to you in a simpler term. It simply means this: when change comes into your life, whatever that change is, and it leaves us disorientated or under heightened levels of stress, after we have a clear and compelling vision for our life, we also need to evaluate whether what we are going through can be changed or if it's out of our control completely. That's very important. We need to know, can I change what I'm going through in any way? And then finally, if I can't change it, I must then accept it as it is. Those are two very, very powerful ideas that I want to share with you today in managing change. So I learned this principle from Dr. Stephen Covey, and he said it in such a nice way. He said, everything in life relating to change can be put into two categories. He called them the circle of influence and the circle of concern. So basically what he means is this: the circle of concern is everything in our life that we care about, that we're worried about, that's bothering us. We care about it, but there's nothing we can do about it, right? It's like, for example, the economy, the state of the economy going through a recession. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't change that thing. That is what we call the circle of concern. Then you get the circle of influence, which is things in your life that you absolutely have control over, can influence, can change for the better. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. Let's actually talk about the economy. Let's say our circle of concern is the devastating effects coronavirus has had on our economy, the recession, loss of jobs. The question is, what can we do about the situation we're in? Can we change the fact that corona has come? Can we change the fact that the job losses have come and people have suffered financially? Is there anything we can do about that? Now, the way you answer that's important, because overall, realistically, there's not much we can do about the fact that our economy has shrunk 51%, according to the government gazettes that they've released. 51% in this time. We can't do anything about that. So that is what we call the circle of concern. We're concerned about it, we care about it, but realistically, there's nothing I can do about it. Then we have something called the circle of influence. That's the things that I absolutely have control over. So let's keep talking about the economy. Now, even though I can't change the recession, I can't change the struggle, I can't change the job losses, all those things, what I can control absolutely is things like my attitude. that is still mine to control despite what I'm going through. The second thing is maybe you're worried about losing a job. Updating your CV is something in your control. Upskilling yourself, working on your spending habits, lowering your debt. All those things are still absolutely in your control. And that's the area we must focus on, our circle of influence. Now, by the way, when I say to accept, it doesn't mean that we like it. It doesn't mean we're just happy with the way things are. No, accept simply means that I accept the reality. The reality is the economy is in a bad space. Facts, there's stats, there's figures. It's in a bad space. And in my capacity, in my power, I cannot change that. But what I can do is change the things that are in my area of influence or ability. And those are things, like I said, attitude, updating my CV, getting a new skill, being a good person, all those kind of things, depending on what we're talking about. There are things that no one can take from you. And that is our last greatest freedom, is the ability to choose how we respond to what we're going through. So remember, there's the circle of concern and the circle of influence. And it's important as people going forward in the aftermath is to determine which is which. What things in our life, out of all the issues on our heart, what things are just in the area of concern and what things can we realistically change? And I say realistic because that's the most important thing. We have to be realistic about what we can change and what we cannot. So, for example, the coronavirus has come and we're like, oh no, don't worry, I'm going to heal this thing. Realistically, can we do that? No. So what that does, it just puts unnecessary stress on you. But what can you deal with? Social distancing, wearing masks, sanitizing, all those things. That is in your control, right? You see what I'm saying? You all understand what I'm saying? So we've got to understand that there are things that I can change and there's things that I can't, and then I must accept. That's a great principle of life. So we must determine which is which first. So what I recommend for you guys to do today, tomorrow, this week sometime, is write a list and write down every issue in your heart, everything that you're concerned about, everything that bothers you. Write it down, right? Once you've done that, I then want you to determine which category it falls under. So you might have all these things: fear of the future, fear of your loved ones, whatever. And you put them all down and then you say, which one is which? Can I control this thing? Yes or no? If it's no, put it in the circle of concern. If you can do practical things to change it, put it in your circle of influence. And then this is the most difficult part, is that you must focus on the things that you can change. Focus on what you can influence. Doesn't mean that the circle of concern you don't care about. It just means that you're putting your energies into something that you can actually change. It's very important. The reason I suggest you do this is because so many of us, many people I speak to, are dealing with, a lot of the time, they're actually trying to change things that cannot be changed. They're trying to change this terrible thing that happened to them in the past, which we can't go back and erase. And that's a circle of concern issue. And it keeps coming back and it keeps affecting their lives. But what we can do is work on what we can, which is our present and our future. So we've got to be able to determine which is which. It's very, very important. We need to determine which is which. Can I control this? Can't I control this? And if I can't, I must accept it as it is. Now, when we are trying to control the things we cannot, it brings unnecessary stress. It makes life more complicated. You lose peace, you lose sleep, because it's out of your hands. It's completely out of your hands. And I feel that so many of us, especially even as believers, there's so many things we're trying to control. We're trying to work out behind the scenes. We're trying to get better for us, that are out of our control, out of our power, out of our influence. And it's just draining us. It's just exhausting. It's just pushing us down. And so what we need to do instead is say, okay, what can I do? What can I focus on? What are the things that I can influence for the better? Despite the things I can't change, what can I change? And focus on those only. So let me ask you some questions. Firstly, right now, what are we tirelessly trying to change that is beyond our control? What are we trying to change that cannot be changed? What are you spending so much time and so much energy on trying to fix, but it's out of your hands to fix? Identify that. Second question, what can we change in our lives? But for some reason, we just haven't. What can we influence for the better, but haven't? We've chosen not to, or we didn't know we could, and we've left it alone. Both of those things are important. In the midst of great change, in great difficulty, we must know which issues fall where. So why? So that we can apply our powers in the right place. That's so powerful. I started learning this, and it's made my life a lot simpler. It's made my life a lot more at peace. And I'm still practicing. I don't have it right all the time, but I'm still trying to figure it out. But generally, it's getting a lot better. If I can determine I'm concerned about this only, but I can't control it, I leave it in God's hands. But the things I can, I'm more actively interested in pursuing and fixing. I want to give you this model that the psychologist built. I want to talk to you about it. This lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was looking at the way that people, once they were diagnosed with terminal illness, how did they deal with it? What kind of process did they go through? And she developed this model called the transition or change curve. Anyway, basically what it showed was that we all start on a high point like this, and then we dip during this period, and eventually we'll make our way back up. So basically that's what the graph looks like, right? But anyway, what they discovered in later studies was that people react to loss of loved ones, to great change, in the same way as hearing news as they've received terminal illness. They react the same way. They go through the same kind of cycle, the same kind of periods. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Basically, the model shows there are 4 stages that we go through on our journey to acceptance. Okay, so the first one, stage number 1, is denial. When you're faced with great and difficult change, the first thing that happens is we deny it. When the corona pandemic came, think about this. The whole world was like, nah, it's not true. It's just a flu. It's not as bad as everyone says. Oh, it's not going to get you. Don't worry. It's not going to. And look what's happened. The first stage is always denial. But the problem with denial is we are also in a state of great confidence and great energy. That's why we can deny so hard, because our confidence levels are up and our energy levels are so high at that point. But then they discovered what happens eventually is your confidence and your energy starts to dip. And you head towards stage 2. And stage 2 is the need for support. So what's happened is I was denying this thing, and now my energy and my confidence is dropping, and now I realize I need support. And that's the stage where I'm most angry. And I start asking questions. Why is this happening to me? How can I be going through this? Are you with me, God? Do you hear me, God? You know, we've been through that, I'm sure. Each and every one has gone through that. And that's at the low, low point. Then what happens in the curve, we start going towards step 3. By the way, part of the need for support, we start asking questions like, why me? What have I done to deserve this? All those things, like I said. We start to move towards number 3, which starts to climb, which is called exploration of the condition. So what happens is now we realize, okay, I've been in this place. This is the reality of where I'm at, and we start to explore it. More than that, we start to look for new options and opportunities within it. That's the starting point of your upward curve. And it's a process to go through. And that finally leads us to the highest point again, which is called acceptance. I accept that this is how it is. I accept that this is what I've gone through. I accept it. And the reality is most of us are going to go through those 4 stages on trying to accept anything that we right now are refusing to accept. We will start off with denial. We will then recognize our need for support or help. Then we will go into exploring our condition, and finally we'll get to acceptance. And how long that takes depends on the individual. It can take a couple of weeks, can take a very long time. The point is, her model I thought was so interesting and so accurate of what we go through. And we're talking about accepting change, and we're going to have to go through that process to accept the things we can't change. Accepting what we can't change, by the way, is powerful and liberating. It frees us and puts us into a place of peace once more. I want to read you a famous prayer that was written by a man called Reinhard Niebuhr 100 years ago or so. The Alcoholics Anonymous, etc., all use it. And basically it says this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can, that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm sure you've heard that somewhere in your life. It's a famous prayer. Alcoholics Anonymous believe in it. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's exactly what we're talking about tonight. Knowing which is which, accepting what we can't, working towards what we can, and wisdom to know the difference. So we're saying, give me the serenity or the peace just to accept that what I can't control, I can't control. Let me be okay with that. And the difficulty is we are so reluctant to let go of control and perceived power, even though we're never in control. I mean, I don't think we're ever actually in control of life, but there's a perceived control that we have. No, if I just do stuff, I'm in control, because it gives us that sense of control. But there are certain things way, way out of our control. We can't control anything. Really, that's why we have to have faith and just trust and push forward in God, right? So I want to read you a quick scripture, Matthew 6:25. And basically, it's Jesus talking. You all know the scripture, I'm sure. He says, I tell you, do not worry about your life. Don't worry about what you'll eat, what you'll drink, what you'll wear. He says, is not your life more important than food and your body more important than clothes? He says, look at the birds of the air. He says, they don't sow, they don't reap, they don't store away in barns, they don't have big portfolios or housing things, they don't have investments of any kind, yet your Father still feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than them? And this verse 27 is what I really want to focus on. It says, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And the answer is, and science even proves that the answer is actually no, it actually decreases your life. Worry has the potential to decrease your time here. So God's saying, don't worry, trust me. Now, obviously, this scripture is applying to our lives in general and trusting God to provide for us through every season, which is such a powerful lesson anyway. But I'm going to apply it here to tonight to change management. Worry is such a big thing for us, but Jesus says, instead of doing that, trust me to provide. Trust me to carry you through. And that's what we have to do as believers. We have to believe and trust God. Even now, we can trust God through the pandemic, through the lockdowns, through the shrinking of the economy, all the negative effects that God will still see us through. That's important. That's our base. Okay? But the key is to stop spending time and energy and focus trying to control things that we realistically have no power over. Then, when we realize that, instead, we put all of our energy into the things we can change. Tonight, I wanted to keep it very short, very simple, very practical for you. This is step 2. How do we live in the aftermath of great and difficult change? How do we do that? And it's simply this: change what you can and accept what you can't.